Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. Hey, beautiful souls. I hope everyone is well amidst these really wild times. I just had an interesting experience. I watched a documentary that was about a spiritual group that I was a part of. This was back in the late 90s, and there was we created a spiritual community in a very small kind of rural town, and it caused a bit of an uproar with the locals. And so a documentary was made about it. So I'll put a link below. You can check out the trailer, or I think you can watch it for $3 if you feel so inclined. It's not that particularly interesting, but it just took me on a stroll down memory lane, and that actually wasn't the first sort of unhealthy group I was a part of. It was actually the second. And so I wanted to share a little bit about the first unhealthy group I was a part of, and what I've learned now and how it can help illuminate the problem with Neo-Advaita. So the first sort of unhealthy, and it wasn't even super unhealthy per se, was there was a man named Benjamin Krem. You can look him up. And Benjamin Krem taught that there were all these spiritual masters who were sort of working behind the scenes, who were now going to come forward and lead humanity into a golden age. The chief one of this being a master named Maitreya, which of course a phrase taken from the Buddhist tradition. Klazje Hazje, good morning. Hi, thanks for saying hi. So what was really interesting about this is when I first read this, I was like, that sounds kind of silly. You know, like this guy was really serious, and I was like, this just sounds silly. But he taught this form of meditation, and I was intrigued by it because he said through doing this meditation, you are helping positive energy become available to the planet. And I'm like, that's cool that you could like meditate and do service. I mean, maybe I was lazy. Um, but I like the idea of a spiritual practice that actually could be helpful. But I was still very skeptical about this. And just hang with me in a moment. We'll get to the real point of all this. And so I did the meditation. You're supposed to do it in groups. So I actually got some people together and did it. Didn't really feel anything, but I just kind of felt compelled. And so I organized a group to do this meditation, and like 4 people came. They were all strangers, and we did this meditation together. And oh my God, I had such a powerful experience. It was not just like being showered with love, it was as if I was full of love. And after the meditation, like everyone I looked at, I loved them and I loved life. And it's like I got intoxicated, kind of like this divine intoxication. It was very powerful. And I was probably about maybe 22 or 23 at the time. No, I think I was 22. And I didn't know what was going on, but just it was really powerful. But here's where things get interesting. Because of that powerful experience, and I don't have the words to express how powerful it is. It was just like it was like a whole nother reality had been put on top of this reality. And I was able, like this reality, and I was able to see and interact with this reality in a completely different way. It was very powerful. Here's where things get interesting. Because of that powerful experience, I said, oh, this guy must be telling the truth. And so I suspended disbelief, and I suspended critical thinking, and I just assumed that everything this guy taught was true. Now, isn't that what happens? Clase Jahase, it's kind of an off-topic question. It's a little distracting, but I'll circle back around to that later. So, and then I realized, that set the stage for my whole spiritual path for many years. Lack of critical thinking, lack of discernment. Too easy, too ready to believe. And I think this happens a lot in Neo-Advaita. If people go to a satsang, I don't even want to call it a satsang. They go to an event that is falsely called a satsang, and then they have a special experience. Maybe usually not as strong as what I'm talking about, though occasionally I bet people have experiences that strong at satsangs. And not just an experience, but something that shifts how they perceive reality. And so then this idea comes in, well, what this teacher is saying must be true, or this teacher must be enlightened. And right then and there, disbelief gets suspended, and it just creates a whole world of problems, Because, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, the world is full of BS when it comes to things spiritual and religious. It's just full. It's overfull. It's overflowing with nonsense, partial truths. And so it gets even more confusing because there's this classical idea of surrendering to the guru. And of course, most of us were, not most of us, I was, and many people in the Western world who were raised religiously, we were raised with the idea to just sort of surrender to the Bible, or surrender to church, or surrender to the organization, and don't question, like the Bible or the organization or the church or the preacher is perfect, right? And it's a very harmful way to approach spiritual things. I've been around the block. That was just the first of many sort of delusional things I explored. And there's a lot of nonsense out there. And there's a lot of people with, I don't think this guy, Benjamin Krem, had major psychological issues. I got to meet him, actually. He seemed like a nice guy and very centered and calm. And I think he was just had some delusional beliefs. But there's a lot of teachers out there with really serious psychological imbalances. So if you surrender to someone who's psychologically imbalanced, then it's going to be a shit show, right? You're surrendering to insanity. So yeah, just a little stroll down memory lane that I hope could be helpful to understand. I think what happens a lot in Neo-Advaita satsangs is people feel something, because intellectually, initially, Neo-Advaita or Advaita Vedanta seems ridiculous, right? What do you mean I'm consciousness? What do you mean, my true self is always at peace? but people feel something special. Even if it's not powerful, there's still a very special presence that often shows up in these satsangs. And then to boot, if you start thinking about these ideas, that's a form of self-inquiry, and that'll give you a temporary taste of enlightened states of consciousness. That the problem isn't that Neo-Advaita teachers are teaching something that's false. The problem is they're teaching something that's half true. If it was all false, then, or all ridiculous, like if I had kept my common sense, I would have just been like, well, this was an amazing, powerful experience. I'm going to keep doing the practice. And God, most of these ideas, most of the things this guy is teaching, that they seem absurd to me. So, yeah, I hope that's helpful. All right. Good. All right. So, what a cool name. Klas Jehasje. What's your idea with the word intention? Class. Okay. That's easier. I mean, so there's a lot of talk around the word intention because of law of attraction, but I don't really talk about intention. I don't think about it. I don't talk about it much on this channel, but I don't think about intention from that perspective much. But I do think about it from a psychological perspective, and from a very different spiritual intention, spiritual direction of constantly having the intention to be connected to the divine. So yeah, but the sort of the law of attraction idea of attention, I don't put much attention on that. But it's a profound word. Actually, from the Hindu tradition, there's an ancient verse that I think is very, very powerful. And the verse is, "You are your deepest driving desire. As your desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny." So it starts with, "You are your deepest driving desire." But we could easily say you are your deepest driving intention. Like, what's the intention that drives you? And according to this verse, which I think is from the Upanishads, that deep intention you have drives everything else in your experience. So I think it's profound to reflect on, how do you want to show up in the world? Like, what's your it's very not necessarily a non-dual thing, although it can be, but just to ask, what do I value and how do I want to live? I think I like the phrase of living with intention, this idea of having values and then living by them. And then this transfers into Advaita Vedanta, in that you start with karma yoga and you have the intention to serve God. And then bhakti yoga, having the intention to love God. And then Raja yoga, having the intention to quiet the mind and cultivate a sattvic lifestyle to prepare you for self-inquiry. So it can. Oh, pardon. It's way past my bedtime. So it's a powerful word and an interesting question. All right, dear ones, I'm going to sign off. I wish everyone a beautiful Are these thoughts or going with the experience? I don't know exactly what you mean by that. Yeah. Are these thoughts? I mean, going with the experience, of course, sounds like a surrender. Intention is a plan. Well, so here's the thing. According to the Vedic wisdom, you know, let me backtrack for a moment. So according to Sanatana Dharma, the underlying philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, human beings have one of four intentions: pleasure, security, dharma, or moksha. So the first two are easy. Pleasure, okay. Security, usually in the form of money or success or power. Dharma means to cultivate righteousness and good character and do the right thing, to be virtuous, basically. And then fourthly, moksha. So according to Sanatana Dharma, and hence according to Advaita Vedanta, every single human being, which includes you and me, is primarily pursuing one of those four things. So just right there, you can reflect on yourself a little bit. Okay, well, where is most of my attention? Where is most of my attention? Because let's go back. You are your deepest driving desire. As your desire, so is your will. As your will, so is your deed. As your deed, so is your destiny. So if your deepest driving desire is for pleasure, then you're going to spend all your time thinking about pleasure and trying to acquire it. And if it's all about security, then you're going to spend all of your time da-da-da. And if it's about righteousness, then that. And if it's about moksha, freedom, then that. And so there's no judgment, by the way. Sanatana Dharma just accepts that people are at where they're at. But so in some ways, intention is at the root of non-duality. It's certainly at the root of Sanatana Dharma, the underlying philosophy of Hinduism. And so this idea is intentions just thoughts? It's a little dismissive. I don't like that way of thinking. That's it's a little bit Neo-Advaita. Like, right? Neo-Advaita will just be like, oh, everything is just thoughts. Like your intentions, your desires, your feelings. There's kind of this in Neo-Advaita, there's this thing of like, oh, that's just thoughts, or oh, that doesn't matter, or even that's not real, right? Whereas actual Advaita Vedanta and Sanatana Dharma says that all these things have their proper place, and that without cultivating the correct intention, you're going to fail on the spiritual path, which is one of the places that Neo-Advaita fails, is it doesn't teach people to properly prepare or properly cultivate the desire for liberation. You can't cultivate the desire for liberation you can't. If someone is primarily interested in pleasure, then for them to go to a Neo-Advaita satsang is just going to put them at war with themselves. It's in Hinduism and it's this process of moving people from pleasure to security to dharma to moksha, moving your intention. Because it's primal. We're talking about desire and will. And yeah, it's not a little thing. So, interesting question. Thank you, Klaus. Hadn't thought about that in a while. All right, dear ones, blessed evening to all. Well, you did a good job. I hope I didn't speak too fast. Yeah, you were able to translate it clearly. So take care, beautifuls. Big love.